I'm gonna get started. So my name is Mike Roberts. I run a small nonprofit organization in California. We are a high intervention intermediary. Does anybody know when I say high intervention, what does that mean? High touch?
Engagement.
High engagement, what else? In many cases, we have been the employer of record. So we have also taken on the investment in that individual to get them to where they eventually will be great employees for some other party. I want to start with a little bit about our journey. It's about 2019. We're just starting to register our first program with the state of California. In California, we are a SAA state. We have a separate division of Industrial Relations Department of Apprenticeship Standards, so DAS. And they've just given us approval to operate. And on that same day we got approval to operate, we were given the shelter-in-place order for COVID. All of the companies that had in the lead up to our starting this apprenticeship program completely abandoned their initiatives and said that they were putting freezes on all their hiring. So that's where we started. And believe me, when we got that shelter order in place, I was just frantic because I knew that we needed to make a radical shift and we either need to go back to what we were doing before, which was not registered apprenticeship, and I potentially needed to go back to what I was doing before, which was I was a software engineer. And we had to make a pretty quick decision if we were even going to be able to do this 100% remote. Because my experience had always been at working at previous coding boot camps, the best experience for those participants was in person with an instructor, spending 40 to 60 hours per week in a space together, going through the rapid change that they needed to in a very intense type program. Needless to say, I was not excited about an online program, but we pushed forward. Next, after we've registered, find out that there are approximately 500 workforce investment boards across the country, about 50 in California. And we realized very quickly that the funding that we were told was available to do this apprenticeship work would mean we'd have to collaborate with those 50 different organizations across the state. And every one of them was gonna have a different funding mechanism, different timeline, and different process that we have to follow. So, that's why this screenshot of a roller coaster, some ups and downs. There were days where I was wondering whether or not I was gonna be able to cover payroll. There were times where we hired a bunch of apprentices thinking that a corporation was ready to go, and they pull out at the last second and said, hey, sorry, we decided we're going in a different direction. But all throughout that process, one thing that kept us consistent and focused as a small nonprofit organization was the lives and the people that we were helping. And we were desperate to find any solution we could to make sure we could continue to hire people, continue to train and deploy them into companies. Today, we've had a lot of success, a lot of ups and downs. And one of the things that we found is that as we scaled up and as we scaled down, the funding would sometimes dry up, and we'd have to pivot and change our model. We eventually got lots of people jobs, and we eventually even got designated by the US Department of Defense a SkillBridge provider. How many folks are familiar with SkillBridge? Awesome. For those of you that aren't, it's a program through the Department of Defense where transitioning service members during their last 6 months of active duty can be reassigned to go work at an employer. They still get their regular military pay and benefits. It's just now their job goes from swabbing the deck to working at this employer. And so because we had that, it became the catalyst and the thing we eventually said we're gonna go all in on. This is how do we help transitioning service members, and how do we align that with apprenticeship so that we can get them a path not through just SkillBridge, but SkillBridge and apprenticeship into a high wage, high growth technology job. And so that's what we do primarily today. One of the things that I really believe in is that in order to make apprenticeships work, there's got to be sustainable funding opportunities for employers to buy in, because talent is an investment and not a cost. Because of that statement, and because we so firmly believe that this is really about jobs first, all of the models I'm going to talk about today and the ones that will encourage you to try and seek out and try yourself are going to center around jobs and employment first, and not grants and fundraising. In the 5 years of our existence, we didn't get our first major grant until last year. We got a $1.4 million grant from the Chancellor's Office in California to establish 4 new apprenticeships in AI, cyber, cloud, and data. So that was the first time we got what I would consider a major gift or major award. Up until then, it was only about 20% of our revenue that came into the organization that came from all public sources of funding. So that's WIOA, OJT, that's AIF in California. So all the grants, all the funding from philanthropy was only 20% of our incoming revenue. The rest of the revenue came from either fee-based services or from corporate clients that would hire us to do very specific work. There's a little bit about what we do. We're a very technology-focused organization at Creative Coding Careers. I talked about the fact that we've aligned our SkillBridge program with Apprenticeship, which I thought would be like a no-brainer, but it actually was pioneering in a way because there aren't that many organizations that have a SkillBridge that also combine it together with their apprenticeship program. We do lots of our training, almost all of our training now is done online, virtually. A few of the roles I talked about, software developer has been our bread and butter, to doing software developer and QA engineering apprenticeships for the last 5 years. And now we're adding cybersecurity, data engineering, and even product ownership. One of the models that I often hear people talk about is pre-apprenticeship and starting people off there, like community college, or starting people off there, and then cramming as much as they can in terms of like funding and activity on that side, and then being very hesitant and wanting to do a handoff to somebody else to do what I consider the heavy lifting, which is the apprenticeship, the paid, the wage portion. We, from the very beginning, believed that we need to have the ability to do all of these for our customers and clients. So we often start with discovery and pre-apprenticeship, focus a massive amount of our investment and our business models around apprenticeship, and that leads into career service and placements. One of the models that we think is most successful, and even with some tweaks around the edges, emphasizes different parts of the recruit, hire, train, and deploy, but it's being able to help our companies and customers understand that it's typical to invest about $33,000 in the all-in cost to train a brand new person in a high-wage, high-growth career. Those are the ones I have the most experience with, so I can't speak to healthcare or any of the other industries. But when you talk about this $33,000, about 70% of that is going to be in wages paid directly to the apprentice. And then 30% of it is going to be the cost for training and the oversight and registration and all those other pieces. And this is just to bring the person to what I would call billable hours. So this is the investment that a company would make before they're actually recovering at least what they're investing in their wages after about 6 to 12 months. So the all-in cost, if you want to think about it, what we had to figure out is, how do we come up with $33,000, right? How do we design something that can cover that cost? The first thing I'm going to ask you is, take 2 minutes, and if you could brainstorm a couple ideas you have about how you could come up with a model that would provide you $33,000 per apprentice. Per apprentice. Oh, don't write grants. That's the only restriction is, outside of grants, what kind of model could you develop where you could generate enough revenue to invest $33,000 per person? So much excitement in the room. This is amazing. Does anybody want to share what their big idea is for how they would fund an apprenticeship program and come up with $33,000 per person? Oh, now everybody's shy. Let's talk. Anybody?
We had 3 ideas at
Okay.
this table. That's why we were talking for so long.
Awesome. How about, you want to share just one?
Yeah.
Yeah, we're exploring a model where we have consulting agreements with the company,
Okay.
where we're dedicating professional hours to a consulting agreement, but then part of the funds also go towards apprenticeship training, so that apprentice is shadowing the consulting project basically.
Okay.
And that's
Okay.
part of it.
Okay. You must have seen this talk before. Amazing. I give a consultancy.
What we were speaking about is we work with development boards here from Texas.
Okay.
And so what we would do is, because there are caps on our eligibility and our availability of funding from WIOA or WIOA, rating the funding. So you wouldn't go to one bucket for the monies. You could go up to a certain amount, and under WIOA, you also have the ability to do work experience or subsidized employment under TANF, Adult education and literacy is a whole different bucket of money from Department of Ed that we actually have in Dallas County. And we would look at some of those different types of grants to braid the monies together to come up with a 33K.
Okay. I like the spirit of that answer of braiding funds, and I'm a huge fan of braided funding, but you broke the first rule, which is those are all grants. We're just braiding together. But I like that idea, the concept of thinking outside of the box and not just a single funding stream, but how can we combine the funding streams to get to the total number? Because you know that's way above your ceiling, right? You're not gonna be able to very easily, well, I don't know if it's potential, to get to $30,000 of WIOA funding in one small swoop. Let me talk about the first model because it's very close to table number 1, and that is we started with a model where we thought, how could we just deliver services or software to organizations and provide them real value? And part of that engineering team are gonna be apprentices. So they're gonna get hands-on experience. The problem with that, biggest challenge is that early career developers are not super productive. So there's a limit to the capacity that they have to deliver value and services for organizations, but it's a very easy sell in terms of trying to figure out how could you bootstrap an organization. So this is what we went with. I don't have deep pockets, and so coming from a career as a software engineer and trying to leverage my background, it was like, this is gonna be the simplest sell. I'm gonna walk into the business owner and say, hey, business owner, I'm sure you have a backlog of things that are just not getting done by your software engineering team because they're just not a high enough priority. And you've got all these other things that you're trying to ship and get done. How about if I could have some of my software engineers work on the things that are at the middle or back of your backlog and add value to someone on your team, internal or external customers? Would that be interesting to you? Oh, and by the way, you're gonna get a chance to look at some software engineers that might be good members of your team eventually. But hey, you don't have to hire anybody, no strings attached. We're just gonna deliver a value for some of your customers. Easy sell, right? About the easiest thing you could sell. And that was how we started. That was model number 1. Generates revenue very fast. It's agency style, consulting style engagements. You can pick the clients up, you can deliver value for them, and you can start to build a war chest for phase 2, because this is very hard to scale. There are other organizations that have done this, that have, Tectonic is one. They were in Colorado. Bitwise is another. They were in Fresno. What happened to those two organizations?
Bitwise bought Tectonic and then did.
Yeah, so Tectonic was not generating the revenue and scaling, so they were acquired by Bitwise, and Bitwise completely imploded. 2 co-founders are in federal prison.
That's not a good story.
It's not a good story.
That's not encouraging, right?
It's not a good story. So
That wasn't our model.
yes. It's not a sustainable model, right? It's not a sustainable model. There's gotta be a better way. And we thought hard about this. We thought it's consuming a lot of Mike's time, my time. I was spending more of my time as a senior engineer than I was as a CEO growing the organization. And the senior folks on our team were spending more time on projects than they were really coaching the early career professionals. And so it becomes a lot more, even though we tell people it's the middle of the backlog, not your highest priority things. They always have the need, the insatiable desire to get things shipped quickly. And so that sort of isn't an efficient and scalable model if we're looking at the participant's experience. What I want you to do is take 2 minutes, and I'm gonna have you pitch your idea to a partner. Is there anybody who wants to take a stab at selling the room on your idea? You got a chance to okay, there we go. Very slow, very slow.
My name is Liz Harris and I work for Cushman & Wakefield. We are a commercial real estate company, but we also employ people to work in the buildings that we also buy and sell. So we employ HVAC technicians, electrical, building engineers, so on and so forth. Basically the janitor that works in the buildings all the way up to the roofer on the top are the people that we put in those buildings. So we have quite a few apprenticeships. And the model that we had to do was not necessarily looking at how to ask people for money, but looking at waste that's already occurring in their business and then getting them to convert some of that waste, Getting them to convert some of that waste into actual apprenticeships. So for our business, every time a rec is sitting open, it runs us about $250 a day. So every maintenance technician that we cannot put into a spot, it costs us $250 a day. So what we did was my partner Roger is also here and said, hey, let us convert some of these open recs that have been sitting open for 90 days or more into apprenticeship recs. Number one, we're able to recoup that money within 120 days because we have somebody that's no longer sitting empty, and we get to offer the salary to the apprentice at a slightly lower rate than it would be to pay a fully qualified maintenance technician. So instead of paying someone $22 an hour, we're able to now pay them $16 an hour within that apprenticeship rate. Excuse me, I'm nervous.
You're doing awesome.
And we were able to seed this idea to different areas of our business over the past 6 or 7 months. And we just got approval at the start of this year to officially begin to look at converting our long-term open recs for our hard-to-fill positions into apprenticeship recs so that we can now begin to fill up and close up some of those recs and also have our apprentices. So that was just one model that we had that worked for us. Because we kept asking for money and they were like, no, we can't afford it. And I'm like, but y'all are wasting, y'all are literally burning $250 a day. So what do we do with that? How do we fix that? How do we change their mindset to get them to now say, okay, yeah, we're willing to take a chance on this apprentice. We have a good mentor in place. And now we've created not only an apprenticeship, but a talent pipeline as well, because we know that our aging employees are aging out. And so now we've created this talent pipeline where we can continually train them, because we don't just want them to stay with us, we want them to grow with us, because we don't just have jobs, we have careers.
Go business.
Brilliant. First off, why are we doing this? Why am I going through these little exercises? Is this helpful? Yes, I see nods. What's the point? Yes, to get employers to engage in apprenticeship.
Get them to invest.
Get them to invest, right? So engaging them, making sure that they know that they need to invest and understand that this is an investment opportunity for them to upskill or bring net new talent in. What else?
I think it gives us an opportunity to think of innovative ways that we can.
Yeah, I want you thinking, right? I don't want to slide deck you to death. I want you thinking about how could you take this information and fly home with all the excitement of drinking the Kool-Aid about apprenticeships for a couple days and have something tangible that you can then start implementing. The second model. Man, this is hard. The whole team, all the leadership teams, right, this is hard. What can we do that can make this easier? And I said, if we really believe in the people that we're hiring, then what if we front-loaded all the RSI? And what if Mike figured out how to get just a little bit of cash put together, the money that we'd already put into some of these projects, and we just literally hired someone and put them full-time into training. That's all they did. And then once they were done, we'd go to one of our partner organizations and say, hey, I have someone that's ready to hit the ground. Here's the thing. I want to offer you a contract to hire. The person's ready. This is the contract. You're going to pay for 3 to 6 months. And then if you want to just convert the person, you can convert them. All I ask is, I'm a nonprofit, just cover our costs of what we invested into this person. So you can either do it by having a contract for 6 or 12 months, or you can do it by having a contract for 3 months, and then just buying out the rest of the expense that we paid to invest in this person. It worked amazing. The challenges with this are very expensive, because you're going to end up with a bench of talent that you're starting to groom and get ready. And it's hard. Mike doesn't have a lot of money. So it's financially very difficult, challenging to scale without help or a lot of customers. We were fortunate in that I live in beautiful San Diego. San Diego is the home where ServiceNow started. How many of you are familiar with organization ServiceNow? A few hands going up. Okay. And having been in San Diego, been a software developer for a long time, I knew a lot of folks that ran ServiceNow practices. So I knocked on the door and I said, hey Todd, if I train a person, you tell me what you need them to be skill level wise, what they need to know, would you hire apprentices? Could we do a contract to hire them? And he was like, sure, why not? They went on to hire waves of people from us. They're usually about 2 at a time. They did 6 times in a row. We found other partners across the US Same thing. Once they hired one, they tried it, the contract to hire model was amazing, and they would come back to us. They couldn't go any faster because, as I was sharing with this team here, as you add early career professionals to your team at a practice, at a service provider, it takes time for them to be absorbed, and they're taking time and resources from the senior engineers, so they get to a saturation point, and then the next thing that you would need to do to continue to grow with that same organization is either wait or provide them a senior engineer with some of the juniors. So you sell them a pod, right? So if you have the cash and you can advance the funding needed to grow that, it can grow and it can scale. We've seen tons of success with this model. So this was the second model. This is the one we got burned on. Can anybody imagine, like, how would we get stuck?
They didn't wanna pay you.
No, they're actually good payers.
A lot of costs
No
being a
retention.
contractor, being an employer of record.
Sorry, what was that?
There's a lot of costs being an employer of record.
There is a lot of cost, but we're gonna also assume that there's revenue coming in. That's a great answer, though. It is very expensive to be the employer of record. And then what happened a couple of years back, or at least a year back?
Layoffs.
Everything started slowing down.
And then you
So all
got-
the partners in the ecosystem were like, hey, all of our projects are on hold. Everything's stuck right now. Everything's slowed down. So as things slow down, our bench just grew. So now we got this bench of talent. Like any agency, you don't want to carry a bench. Bench hours kill your business. So that's what's most difficult. It's very high risk because you don't want to get stuck with the bench. It's great for the participants because they get a great experience. They get to come in, they're not under pressure to have to deliver anything right away. They get that first 6 months of RSI training, they get lots of love and support, and they get the mentorship. And then they get handed gracefully off to a client, they start working on the client side, and they're still not official yet, right? They get a period through which the team gets to get to know them. And then once they're there for a few months, remember there's no trap here. What's a trap? That if I train you and then you don't go on to work for us or you don't stay with us, then you owe us money. Maybe initially it's free, it's easy, but the trap is you gotta pay us back if you don't go where we say and work the amount of time that we said at that organization. We've never done that because I feel like it's not good. It's not a healthy, ethical position to be in, but because we never applied any kind of trap, we could be in a situation where like we can't recover the cost of the training that we put out and the person could go somewhere else. Our customers knew that, and our customers know that everybody has free will. So even though they're on a contract to hire with you, as soon as you know you want to hire them, you should make them a permanent offer. Because if you don't, what could they do? They could take their newly found skills and they can go to another ServiceNow partner. Another partner is going to poach them. So it creates this incentive for the employer to do the right thing right away, because there's a sense of, I've just invested in this person and they're doing well, I want to convert them. So model 2, it's great, high risk, but you can guess what's coming next. A little activity. All right, so I want you to take, this is all you do is a table. And I want you to take 2 minutes and I want you to come up with what is the main headline that you want to hear talk about your business or your workforce board. What's the main headline that you'd like to have in the newspaper 1 year from today after a successful deployment of one of these models? Again, it's got to be without relying on grants because we know the grants are always going to be there. Take 2 minutes as a table, go around for some ideas. I'm going to have you share some of these headlines. We have a headline on this table here. I know you got a good one.
On-the-job training makes a comeback as companies find a new and innovative way to invest in early career talent.
Apprenticeships. I like that. Unlocking talent ROI for small businesses.
Say that again.
Yeah, say that again.
What do they say?
On-the-job training makes a comeback as companies find a new and innovative way to invest in early career talent.
Investing in early career talent. I like that. How about this table here?
I think he said it better than we did.
Yeah.
We said the same thing.
Same thing, ditto, okay.
He just said it first.
Verbatim. They were cheating.
We stealing.
We were trying to go with the newsworthy buzzwords. So a company brings partners together to solve this, first the silver exit, saving company Y $100 million and listing all the stakeholders that are involved.
That's Walmart scale. Right there.
Well, that's what we're getting.
Yeah, again, there have been like very large organizations, right? When you think about the Walmarts, the Accentures, the IBMs, that have been doing this kind of work for a long time. Third is gonna be, we go to an organization and we say that now's the time for you to get on ground floor of apprenticeships. And you find an internal champion within the organization. Someone that has a budget. It's gotta be a decision maker. We were registering the participants on behalf of the organization, so they didn't have to worry about registering. In addition to that, we would handle all of the other, matching them with a mentor and following up with them, making sure they were getting coached, right? So all of that process. But they get hired on day one by that organization. As an example, that's one of the things we did with ServiceNow. We said, hey, you got a budget for this? Great. You got managers that are receptive and the managers want these folks on their team? Great. You've got all the ingredients that you need. You got budget, and you got people that are willing to take these apprentices on, knowing that they're gonna hire them at the end of the period. And at the end of the period in the first year, they start with 3, first cohort, all 3 converted into full-time software engineer L2. So they skipped the level 1 role as a software engineer, went right into an L2 position. That's a nice first job as a software engineer. And these are folks that have no prior experience as a software engineer. Come from a variety of different backgrounds. This is like the gold standard. You get someone that is willing to invest a pilot program, and then the next step is, how do we do this again? How do we go from 3 to 6? How do we go from 6 to 12? And then you'll probably peak out at around 20. Most even large organizations that have maybe several thousand software engineers, you get cohorts in sizes of about 10 to 20 a year, right? This is the easiest to scale because you're playing with other people's money, right? It's other companies' money, not your money. And so it's really just convincing them that this is worth the investment, right?
How long is the sell period for that?
Oof,
Yeah.
brutal. It's brutal. There are situations where we'll be in talks with the company for 2-3 years. But after 3 years, they know and trust you, and they're willing to make the investment, and then they can scale out. Sometimes it's not good if they come to you and they're in a fever pitch to spend money, and you don't have a long relationship with them, and they spend that first amount, but then your internal champion leaves the company. And now how do you navigate an opaque corporate environment to figure out who's gonna pick up the mantle, who's gonna be the new internal champion? This hasn't been socialized high enough at the organization, so there's no buy-in from the CFO or the CEO. So it's really important that you have buy-in across the board. But from my experience, the best, strongest buy-in is gonna be if you're delivering talent onto engineering teams, you gotta get engineering managers to buy in. Because the very next thing they're gonna say is, do they have degrees? That's why I'm bullish on apprenticeship degrees. Because we then take that off the table. It's like, yeah, they're pursuing a degree in computer science. They're halfway through. We have this thing called apprenticeship degrees, and they can finish with your organization. You gotta be able to sell the value to the business as to why they should do something different to what they're already doing.
What's the profile of the businesses usually?
So when we started with project-based work, it was usually very small, could be like a startup, local startup in the community, right? Because they can absorb one brand new person. They need to grow. They're often challenged. They can't hire the best and brightest, so they have to be real scrappy. Mid-sized companies, a little bit easier to do project-based work, right? And then large enterprise is gonna have the easiest capacity to do this model, but you have to be willing to put 2-3 years into developing the customer to the point where they're like, okay, yeah, this makes sense.
So out of the 3, which was the main bucket? Sorry,
So we are probably moving more right now from enterprise customers back into delivering talent into the ecosystem and helping to support other people running their programs. With SkillBridge, it's a little different because with SkillBridge, we're training people that are transitioning from the military into civilian roles, and they usually come with a security clearance, and they usually come with some MOS that they were doing in the military before they're transitioning to civilian life. So for us, it's not necessarily finding the size of the business, it's finding the right fit for our population that we're serving.
The pricing, is it per person, is it a project, I mean, how do you?
It varies, and oftentimes it's gonna come down to, so there's two main splits in the road. The first is the company gonna be the employer of record, or are we gonna be the employer of record? If we're the employer of record, it's gonna be expensive, because we have to payroll them, and we have to make sure that we have enough to operate our organization, right? Then again, in full transparency, the number's around $33,000 per person. So no matter how you shake it, whether you, on the front end, they cut you a check for $200,000 and say, this is what we need from you, or on the back end, they say, we'll convert them at X, Y, or Z. All of those things, we've tried all of those different things.
And you're saying the 33,000 and 70% is wages and benefits?
Yeah. To do the math, just
Not over
again,
12
because
months.
there's a ton of different ways you can model out the math. The simplest way, and the way that people like are often like, the $33,000, how is that broken up? What we usually think about is what's the time period that the person's not really at billable, or they're at like a training wage. And while they're in that training wage, you're gonna invest about $33,000. After that, they're just like a regular employee, so just treat it like a regular employee.
So over what time period is the
It
33,000?
depends. So some organizations will wanna move quickly. They'll wanna, from 6 months from the person started, they wanna make a decision and hire the person. And they're pretty much ready to be at billable hours at that point. We can turn, in software engineering, we can turn someone into a competent entry-level software engineer in 6 months. And I came from the boot camp space. So my background is I'm a software engineer by trade, been writing software for more than 3 decades. About 8 years ago, I went to work at a coding boot camp, and I was responsible for the classroom experience. So hiring instructors, rewriting curriculum, getting licensed, all those kinds of things. So I just took all of that and said, what if we just hired the person? And because they all came, they were stressed out about, I just spent all this money on boot camp, I just spent $20,000, am I gonna get a job? How do I get a job? When am I gonna get a job? I can't survive that much longer. But that process was like 3 months, right? And then for the next 9 months, they would really struggle to build their professional portfolio, to build enough work experience. But once they got 1 year in, every company wanted to talk to them. Because now they're the mythical, I want to find a mid-level engineer. They're not as expensive as a senior engineer, but they've got some experience. Okay, that's a junior engineer, and that's 6 to 12 months of experience. Mid-level engineers are like heads down, working at the company. They're not heads up looking for jobs. But we just try to replicate that in an apprenticeship model.
Who's paying for the RTI?
In California, we have something called related supplemental instruction, and we are paid by the state. We can ask the state to reimburse us. We get about $10 roughly per hour for training the person. And again, it depends on the scenario with the company. The company might be doing that training, in which case we would tell them, hey, you should register so that you can get paid for that training. If we're doing the training, then that might just be an offset. So we'll say, hey, we're gonna discount the amount that you have to pay to get this talent, because we're getting some of this money from a grant or getting some of this money from RTI. So we can basically break it down and say, it'll cost you a little bit less because you're hiring someone that has these other discounts that are available.
So just to be super clear, that 33,000, is that before they step foot on in their apprenticeship?
No. So all of our apprenticeships, so as apprenticeship works, they're always employed from day one. Sometimes they'll be employed by us on day one. So we might bring them in, we might bring them, and by the way, we don't just pull people off the street. They gotta go through a pre-apprenticeship program. They don't have to complete our pre-apprenticeship program, but they have to start our pre-apprenticeship program. And then we look and see, because we're technologists, we look at the data. See, is this person active? Are they engaging? And then, okay, now you're at least in the qualified pool.
I guess, I'm sorry to cut you off. I guess what we're trying to be very clear on is, regardless of where the money comes from, whether it's a grant or whatever, 33 grand covers 6 months to a year.
That's gonna cover some of their salary, and it's gonna cover the cost of whoever the training provider is, right? So that's our cost to have someone that registers the person with your state or federal. That's gonna cover the cost of having mentors. That's gonna cover, from our perspective, we're a volunteer organization, so we go out and find the mentors. So we develop the network of mentors and all of the pieces that are necessary to run the program. And some portion of wages until that person can actually, through their work, have income coming in that covers the cost of their, so they're
So I guess-
sustainable at that point.
So there's 6 month period, so let's say it's a 6 month period of
Mhm.
them doing the apprenticeship before they roll over to the company's payroll. So that's 6 months, what are they getting paid? Does it vary?
Okay, so we start all of our apprentices right now, they get, if they're not a SkillBridge participant, they're just a regular civilian, $20 per hour in San Diego.
Okay.
It will vary depending on your cost of living. San Diego's tough at $20 per hour, but our workforce board pegs their entry level wage at 18, so we're just a little bit higher than what they peg the cost of living basic wage thing. I think I see a hand up over there.
What's the average time in the pre-apprenticeship and what's
Oh,
the screening
great.
process like?
Ooh,
And is
it's
pre-apprenticeship
brutal.
included in the cost that you mentioned?
So what we do is because we want to provide access and affordability for everybody. So all of our pre-apprenticeship training is online, it's virtual, it's self-paced. They can start at any point, they can rip through it, they can take their time. Most folks will take, if they're serious and they're trying to get into the program, they'll take a good solid month and they'll just grind through it. Now, how long does it take for them to get into our program? Right now, we have about 6,000 people that have started our pre-apprenticeship program. We cannot accommodate 6,000 people into our apprenticeship, right? And so it's very rare that someone will be able to go through our pre-apprenticeship and then the timing will align perfectly with a new customer we have and they're like, good to go. They go right from pre-apprenticeship. They're gonna wait there in the pool until we have enough employer demand. At the end of the day, we can't control that. We can advocate and push, but we'll never be able to meet the demand of the interested folks at 6,000, and then we're gonna only take maybe 60 a year, maybe 100 a year, right? So we try and pack as much value as we can into the pre-apprenticeship, because look, we can still give them the best free coding boot camp that I think is available on the internet.
You've got a lot of money invested in pre-apprenticeships and training and 33,000. Do you ever extract a conversion fee from the client?
Yeah, if that's baked into the model for that particular engagement, yes. So we'll
So you
say
can recoup a lot of money on your conversion fee.
potentially. Because it's a combination of the model, the approach that you're taking, and figuring out the timing. The risk that we always face is someone can come through our program, come through the pre-apprenticeship training, be in our apprenticeship program, and then they can meet someone at the grocery store and say, oh, that's cool that you're a software engineer. I'm looking for a software engineer, and they can hire that person. And if we haven't recouped our costs, gone.
What percentage of your revenues are from employers?
It varies, but it's usually been about 70% of our revenue is coming from fee-based services, whether that's us delivering a contract to hire, whether it's delivering software for them, but 75% of it over time has been like us delivering some value, either a new candidate to the person, some software to the person. We have intentionally not, I'm also not good at fundraising, but we've intentionally not tried to rely on fundraising. Primarily because I'm not good at it. I'm a software engineer. I see problems and I engineer solutions to the problem. And the solution a lot of people don't want to work on because it's hard is finding employers and selling apprenticeships. It's really hard work. But if you can find models that work and some balance of the right models for your organization, it is by far much more insulated and sustainable than is the funding source that we are relying on. Are we gonna get that check? I never wanna be in that position. As a software engineer, I never wanna be in a position where I can't control everything, right? I'm a scientist. I wanna control every part of, and it's great now that we can look up and we can start thinking about philanthropy to help us scale and help us to tackle this problem that a lot of people are just, it's just tough. It's tough to sell this to employers. I'll connect with you on LinkedIn, happy to have conversations. Would love to talk to anybody that wants to have me talk to your team or your group about apprenticeships, apprenticeship degrees, etc. All right, I hope I've provided value for you. I'll hang out in the hallway.